Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a marketplace. The air is thick with the dust of feet and the murmur of a crowd. And there, descending from the mountains, is a man, a prophet, a madman, a philosopher, who looks at the people gathered before him, looks into their souls, and decides to tell them the most dangerous truth he knows. He opens his mouth, not to comfort them, but to announce the death of their God. Now listen closely. They do not weep. They do not tear their garments. They laugh. They mock him. They think he is a joke, because to them, God isn't a living presence to be mourned. He's a habit, a Sunday ritual, a comforting ghost they've already forgotten. The prophet Zarathustra stands there, realizing the horror they cannot see. The highest values humanity has clung to for millennia have not just been questioned, they have been devalued. The compass is broken, the moral sun has set, and no one noticed. This is the world of Friedrich Nietzsche's most volcanic work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a book that is not merely read, but endured. It arrives like lightning in the stale air of complacency, and its central paradox is a knife aimed directly at your chest. What if the very things that make you feel safe, moral, and good are the very things that are making you weak, sick, and less than human? Nietzsche, speaking through his fictional prophet, diagnoses a sickness he calls the last man. This is not a villain from a dystopian novel. This is a destination. The last man is the final product of a society obsessed with comfort, security, and universal kindness. He blinks. He wants his tiny pleasure and his tiny pain. He preaches equality not as a noble aspiration, but as a leveling mechanism, because if everyone is equal, no one feels envy, and no one feels the sting of greatness. The last man has invented happiness, and he grinds his teeth when anyone suggests there is something more to strive for, something higher, something dangerous. And here is the gut-wrenching tension that the book forces you to sit inside. Are you a bridge, or are you an end? Are you a stepping stone towards something greater, more powerful, more alive? Or are you the final, comfortable brick in a wall that blocks the horizon? Zarathustra looks at the modern soul and sees a disaster dressed in velvet. He sees a humanity that has killed God, the ultimate source of external meaning, but lacks the courage to look into the resulting abyss. So, they pretend. They invent new gods, the god of the state, the god of social media likes, the god of consumerism, the god of being nice. They flock to ideologies that promise herd-like safety because the alternative, standing alone, creating your own values, facing a meaningless universe and willing it to have meaning, is too terrifying to contemplate. You've felt this tension, haven't you? That quiet whisper in the dead of night that asks if the ladder you're climbing is leaning against the right wall. That nagging suspicion that your deepest moral convictions, the ones you never question, might be a subtle form of cowardice. That the peace you seek might actually be a slow form of Thus Spoke Zarathustra is not a key to a locked door. It is a battering ram. It intends to break down the walls of your comfortable assumptions so that you can finally see the wasteland or the wilderness of possibility that lies beyond. It opens with a prophet descending from the mountains because he is full, because he must empty himself. He comes to give you his greatest gift, not comfort, but a mirror that shows you the face of the last man you are desperately trying not to become. The question the book hurls at your feet is simple, but it will echo through every section that follows. If your morality, your peace, and your happiness are actually the symptoms of your decline, what would you be willing to sacrifice to become something more? If this descent into Nietzsche's dangerous ideas has awakened something in you, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we're climbing deeper into the abyss with every video. And you don't want to face these truths alone. You've been standing in that marketplace, watching Zarathustra be mocked. But now, step back from the crowd. Look closer at what Nietzsche is really diagnosing, because the death of God is merely the symptom. The disease itself runs far deeper, coiled in the very structure of how you've been taught to think, to judge, and to feel ashamed. Nietzsche, through Zarathustra, dissects the cadaver of Western morality and finds a tumor at its core. He names it a slave morality. But don't let the word slave fool you into thinking this is about ancient history or class warfare. This is about you. This is about the invisible architecture of your conscience. Here's how it works and why it's so insidious. For thousands of years, the powerful, the noble, the conquerors defined good as themselves, strong, proud, dangerous, life-affirming. They called bad the weak, the cowardly, the small. This was the morality of the lion. But then, Nietzsche argues, something flipped. The weak, the resentful, the oppressed, unable to win the game of power, did something far more cunning. They reinvented the rules. They took the very traits that made them weak and rebranded them as virtue. Humility became holy. Poverty became blessed. Meekness became the key to the kingdom. They looked at the lion's strength and called it evil. They looked at their own weakness and called it good. This is the hidden problem. Your morality, the very voice in your head that tells you to turn the other cheek, to be selfless, to feel guilty for your power, that voice may not be divine. It may be revenge. It is the ultimate act of psychological warfare, waged by the resentful against the strong, and it has been running silently in the background of Western civilization for 2,000 years. Zarathustra calls this sickness by its true name, resentment. It is not just resentment. It is a deep, festering hatred that the weak feel toward life itself, because life favors the strong, the healthy, the ambitious. Unable to seize what life offers, the resentful soul poisons the well. They create a fantasy world, an afterlife, a heavenly kingdom, where the last shall be first and the first shall be last. They convince the lion that his roar is a sin. And you, sitting here today, have inherited this poisoned well. You drink from it every time you suppress your ambition to avoid seeming arrogant. Every time you feel guilty for wanting more than your neighbor. Every time you hear a voice whisper that power corrupts, that ambition is ugly, that those who succeed must have cheated. This is not universal truth. This is, in Nietzsche's diagnosis, a specific historical weapon aimed at the strong. He points to the priestly type, the ascetic ideal, as the architect of this prison. The priest doesn't wield a sword. He wields guilt. He makes you hate your own body, your own instincts, your own will to life. He says your suffering is punishment for sin, rather than a necessary condition of growth. He chains you to a morality that makes you sick, and then sells you the cure. Look at your own life through this lens for a moment. Where do you feel small? Where do you feel ashamed of your desires? Where do you judge others for their success? That shadow you cast, that is not your humanity. That is, according to Zarathustra, the ghost of a slave rebellion you never even knew you were drafted into. The problem isn't that you're bad. The problem is that your good might be killing you. And if you cannot see this, if you cannot face the rage and resentment coiled in the heart of your own compassion, you will remain exactly what Zarathustra despises most, a creature who calls his chains virtue and his cage civilization. The diagnosis is delivered, the sickness is named, but the question now burns brighter than ever. What happens to a world built entirely on this foundation? Look around you now, not at the marketplace, not at Zarathustra, but at the world you inhabit every single day. The one with its endless scroll of outrage, its quiet desperation masked as contentment, its celebrations of the average, and its suspicion of the exceptional. Nietzsche's diagnosis wasn't abstract philosophy. It was prophecy. And the prophecy has fulfilled itself in the very air you breathe. The unseen consequence of slave morality triumphant is not that everyone became humble and kind. It is that everyone became small. When weakness rebrands itself as virtue, when resentment becomes the hidden engine of moral judgment, the world doesn't elevate the low. It drags down the high. It levels. It flattens. It creates a culture where the tallest poppies are cut down not with swords, but with shame. Zarathustra looks at this world and sees the triumph of what he calls the tarantulas. These are the preachers of equality, not the noble kind that lifts the oppressed, but the venomous kind that cannot bear anyone standing above them. They spin webs of justice that are really nets of entrapment. We have made men equal, they boast, but Zarathustra hears the hiss beneath the words. We have made men equal because we could not bear their superiority. You see this everywhere now, don't you? The suspicion that greets genuine excellence. The reflexive tearing down of public figures the moment they rise too high. The moral outrage that feels so righteous, but smells so much like envy dressed in Sunday clothes. Social media has become the tarantula's perfect hunting ground, a place where millions of tiny fangs can inject their poison into anyone who dares to stand out, to stand apart. But the consequences run deeper than culture. They reach into the very structure of your soul. Nietzsche warns that slave morality doesn't just change what you value, it changes what you are capable of wanting. It amputates your ambition at the root. It teaches you to call your longing for greatness, ego, and your hunger for transcendence, vanity. It convinces you that the highest goal is not to become a god, but to be a good person, which increasingly means a harmless person, a comfortable person, a person who disturbs nothing and no one. And so you find yourself in a world where everyone is nice and no one is noble, where relationships are transactional arrangements between fragile egos rather than crucibles of mutual becoming, where work is something to endure for weekends rather than the hammer with which you shape your soul, where the greatest sin is not cruelty or cowardice, but judgment, because if you judge anyone, you might yourself be judged, and judgment threatens the fragile peace of the leveled herd. Zarathustra sees this and weeps, not tears of sentiment, but tears of rage. He sees humanity becoming sand, smooth, uniform, easy to walk on, impossible to build with. He sees the last human, blinking in the sunlight, saying, "What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star?" And thinking these questions are nonsense because he has his little pleasure for the day and his little pleasure for the night. This is the consequence you are living inside, whether you know it or not. A world optimized for comfort but bankrupt of meaning. A world where you can have everything and be nothing. A world where the death of God left a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushed not new gods, but new drugs, entertainment, consumption, outrage, numbness, anything to avoid the terrifying freedom of creating yourself from scratch. The stakes could not be higher. Zarathustra stands at the edge of this flattened world and offers not comfort, but a cliff. He invites you to look over the edge and see what humanity could become if it broke free of its chains. But to accept that invitation, you must first admit that you are in a prison. And the door, he insists, has always been unlocked. If you felt the weight of this flattened world pressing down on your own ambition, smash that like button and comment below. Where have you seen the tarantulas at work in your own life? Now, finally, Zarathustra stops diagnosing the corpse of your old morality and begins to whisper the secret that could resurrect you. But be warned, this is no gentle prescription. It is not a 7-step program or a mindfulness app. It is a hammer, and it intends to shatter the last pieces of the cage you didn't know you were still carrying on your back. The path to resolution begins with a single terrifying idea. The death of God is not a tragedy to mourn. It is an opportunity. For 2,000 years, humanity looked upward for meaning, for morality, for the blueprint of the good life. But with God dead, with the celestial compass shattered, you are now holding the compass in your own hands. The question is whether you have the courage to look at it. Zarathustra's prescription is the most dangerous idea in the history of philosophy. The Übermensch, the Overman, the Superman. But forget everything pop culture has told you about this concept. This is not a blonde beast in a comic book. This is not domination over others. The overman is something far more terrifying and far more beautiful. It is the human being who has overcome themselves. Listen to Zarathustra's words. Man is a rope, tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss. You are not the destination. You are the bridge. Your entire existence, your suffering, your striving, your longing, it is all preparation for something that does not yet exist. You are pregnant with a self that only you can birth, and the labor is agony. So what does this mean practically? How do you become this bridge? Zarathustra offers 3 metamorphoses of the spirit. Watch closely. This is the hidden map. First, you must become the camel. The camel kneels and asks to be loaded with the heaviest burdens. This is the spirit that endures. It takes on the weight of tradition, of duty, of the thou shalt. It carries the morality of the herd deep into the desert. Most people never leave this stage. They die under the weight, or they learn to love the weight, calling their servitude virtue. But the desert is essential, because in the loneliest desert, the second metamorphosis occurs. The camel becomes the lion. The lion cannot carry new burdens. It must fight. Its enemy is the great dragon named Thou Shalt, whose scales glitter with thousands of years of values. Every scale says, Thou shalt, and the lion says, I will. The lion cannot create new values yet, but it can win the freedom to create. It tears down the old law so that something new can breathe. This is where you are right now, if you have followed this far. You are in the desert, or you are fighting the dragon. But Zarathustra warns you, do not mistake the lion's roar for the final destination, because the third metamorphosis is the hardest of all. The lion must become the child. The child does not fight. The child does not carry. The child plays. The child says yes to life with innocent eyes and creates new values from the sheer overflow of its own power. This is the overman's psychology, not reactive, not resentful, not fighting against anything, but creating from pure life affirmation. You see, Nietzsche's prescription is not to become stronger so you can dominate others. It is to become strong enough that you no longer need to. The overman does not resent the weak because the weak are irrelevant to him. He does not need slaves because his own abundance is enough. He looks at life with all its suffering, its chaos, its cruelty, and says not just, I endure this, but I will this. Again, forever. This is the secret Zarathustra has been guarding. You do not escape suffering. You do not transcend the abyss. You learn to dance over it. You have followed Zarathustra down from the mountain, through the mocking marketplace, into the desert of the spirit. You have watched him diagnose the sickness of slave morality, witnessed the flattening of the world into comfortable mediocrity, and received his prescription for self-overcoming. But now, as he prepares to return to his cave, he turns to face you one last time and whispers the truth that makes all of this either a beautiful dream or a waking nightmare. The ultimate truth of Thus Spoke Zarathustra is not the overman. It is not the death of God. It is not even the will to power. It is a single terrifying idea that Nietzsche hides like a bomb in the final pages. The eternal recurrence. Imagine this. A demon creeps into your loneliest loneliness and says, this life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unspeakably small or great in your life must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Would you throw yourself down, gnashing your teeth, cursing the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine. This is the final synthesis. This is where Nietzsche stops being a philosopher and becomes a mirror held up to your soul. The eternal recurrence is not a cosmological theory about time repeating. It is a psychological test. It is the ultimate question. Can you look at your life every humiliation, every loss, every moment of boredom and despair, and not just accept it, but will its eternal return? Can you love your fate so completely that you would choose it again forever without a single alteration? Most people cannot. Most people live their lives running from the present, numbing the past, fearing the future. They live as if they are waiting for the real life to begin. But Zarathustra's final teaching shatters this illusion. There is no real life coming. There is only this one. And if you cannot say yes to it, all of it, then you have not truly lived. This is why the Overman is necessary. Not because the Overman is stronger or smarter, but because the Overman is the one who can say yes. The Overman has overcome resentment, not just toward others, but toward life itself. The Overman does not need an afterlife to justify this one, does not need revenge against the strong to feel good about the weak, does not need God to tell him what is sacred, because he has learned to create his own sacredness from the raw materials of existence. Look back at the journey. The central paradox was that your morality might be killing you. The diagnosis revealed slave morality as the weapon of the resentful. The consequences showed a world flattened into comfortable meaninglessness. The prescription offered the three metamorphoses as the path to self-overcoming. And now, the final synthesis asks, after all that work, after all that suffering, after all that becoming, can you celebrate? Zarathustra does not end with a lesson. He ends with a sign. He leaves his cave, glowing and strong, like a morning sun that comes out of dark mountains. He has given everything. He has emptied himself. And now he waits, not for disciples, not for followers, but for equals. For those who have gone through the metamorphoses themselves and emerged on the other side, ready to create their own values, to dance their own dance, to love their own fate. The book closes, but your test has just begun. The demon is waiting in your loneliest loneliness. The question echoes across the abyss of your own life. Have you lived in a way that you would be willing to live again, exactly the same, for eternity? If not, the mountain still stands. Zarathustra has shown you the path. But the climbing, the terrible, glorious, agonizing climbing, that part has always been yours alone.